All right. Before we get into the detailed pivotal container service architecture, I want to explain some basic things first. Because when somebody sees this architecture diagram for the first time, it is very easy to misunderstand what all these names represent. If you look at this screenshot, you may see names like VMware, Pivotal, then Bosch, Harbor, Kubernetes, NSX-T, and several other components in the same architecture diagram. And we may think VMware, Pivotal, Bosch, and Harbor were four different companies that came together and created PKS. That's what initially, by looking at the screenshot, we'll come to an assumption, right? That understanding is not correct. Some of these names represent companies or vendors, and some of them represent open source technologies used inside this platform. So first, we need to clearly understand who is the vendor and what is the open source service which has been included in this architectural diagram. Let's explore that. So let's start with VMware. We already know VMware was a vendor and one of the co-creator of this PKS, Pivotal Container Service. VMware already had the infrastructure platform where customers were running their enterprise applications. We had vSphere providing compute virtualization, ESXi running the virtual machines, then vCenter managing the virtual infrastructure, and NSX-T providing software-defined networking and security. When customers started adapting Kubernetes, VMware's role in PKS was to integrate Kubernetes with this enterprise infrastructure so that customers could deploy Kubernetes cluster on vSphere and use NSX-T for container networking, routing, load balancing, and networking security. So VMware was bringing the virtualization infrastructure, networking technologies, and enterprise data center experience into the pivotal container service platform. Now, let's try to understand the next vendor who is involved in this architectural diagram. Okay, the second vendor involved in this architecture diagram is Pivotal. Pivotal was a separate vendor when PKS was introduced, and to understand what Pivotal contributed to this PKS, first we need to understand something called Cloud Foundry. People who is already having some basic knowledge about container, they might aware of this Cloud Foundry, but people who is new to this training, let me explain what is Cloud Foundry, and then we'll discuss other stuffs. In this slide, we are going to understand what is Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry is an application platform, what we normally call a platform as a service, or PaaS. The main objective of Cloud Foundry was to make application deployment easier for developers. So in this slide, you know, I just created an example. Okay, uh, let's look into that example. Just imagine, okay, there is a Java developer and he have to create a Spring Boot application. So in a traditional environment, before we can run that application, somebody has to create a virtual machine, then they has to install the operating system, they has to install Java, then configure the application server, configure networking, then configure load balancing, deploy the application, then monitor the application and maintain the underlying infrastructure. So here the developer depends on the infrastructure team for all of these activities, right? But Cloud Foundry has changed that traditional model. Here, the developer simply provides the application code to the platform using a command such as cf push, and the platform would automatically take care of staging the application, providing the required runtime, scheduling application instances, configuring routes, monitoring the application, restart failed instances, and scaling the application when required. So Cloud Foundry was a large distributed cloud native platform designed to automate application deployment and application operations. All right. Now the important thing we need to understand is what Cloud Foundry has to do with PKs. We already discussed what is Cloud Foundry. Okay, and also I give an example of our traditional environment, how this applications and all are deployed. So actually, we are not using Cloud Foundry inside the PKS architecture. Okay, Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes are two different platforms. Then you might ask a question like why we are talking about Cloud Foundry here. The reason is Pivotal already had many years of experience building and operating large Cloud Foundry environments. To manage those Cloud Foundry environment, Pivotal was using a open source technology called BOSH. BOSH was used to create virtual machines, configure them, monitor them, upgrade them, and recreate them when they failed. So Pivotal already had experience using BOSH to manage a large number of infrastructure virtual machines. So when Pivotal worked with VMware to create PKS, they brought that experience and the BOSH technology into the PKS architecture. So here we are not using Cloud Foundry to deploy Kubernetes. We are using BOSH. For example, when we need a Kubernetes cluster, BOSH creates the required control plane VMs and worker VMs. It installs and configures the required software, and also it manages the life cycle of those infrastructure VMs. If one of the Kubernetes worker VM fails, then BOSH can detect that failure and recreate that VM based on the required configuration. So the connection is very simple. Cloud Foundry is not part of PKS architecture. Pivotal, who gained experience using that Cloud Foundry with the BOSH, they get that BOSH into this architecture. That's how BOSH has came to this PKS architecture. So far we discussed the first two options, right? VMware and Pivotal, both are vendors. Now we are going to move into that Kubernetes section. Okay, because we need to understand where Kubernetes came from. Okay, so first thing is Kubernetes was not another vendor involved in PKS, and Kubernetes was not owned by VMware or Pivotal. They are not the owners. Kubernetes is an open source container orchestration platform originally created by Google based on its experience running containerized application at every large scale. So Google released Kubernetes as an open source project in 2014, and in 2015 Kubernetes became one of the first project contributed to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, commonly called CNCF. So when we say open source, understand what that means in this architecture. That is very important. Kubernetes is not a proprietary VMware product where only VMware controls the software, and it was not a proprietary Pivotal product either. Kubernetes developed as an open source project with contributions from many companies and individual developers. Then this CNCF provides governance and a neutral home for the Kubernetes project, because see, someone has to maintain the standards, right? But here also we should not think of CNCF as a company or vendor that owns Kubernetes, like VMware owns a commercial product, right? Okay, I hope uh, this Kubernetes is not a vendor. Kubernetes again, it's an open source which is used on this pivotal container service architecture. Let's move on to that next one, Bosch. So before moving into Bosch, you know, let's understand why VMware and Pivotal needed Kubernetes in PKS. There could be some reason, right? Let's take an example, just an imagination that we have developed a banking application and packaged that application into containers. Okay, that application is running inside the container. In production, we may need to run hundreds or thousands of containers across many servers, and somebody has to decide which worker node should run each container, restart the application when the container fails, then maintain the required number of application replicas, then expose the application through networking services, and move workloads to the available capacity when required. So here Kubernetes provides the container, the orchestration capability. Okay, so now we are into Bosch. So as I told earlier, Bosch was not another vendor involved in this PKS architecture. Bosch was an open source deployment and lifecycle management technology that originated from the Cloud Foundry ecosystem. We can think of Bosch as an infrastructure lifecycle automation engine. So Bosch knew what virtual machine should exist, what operating system images should run on these virtual machines, and what software should be installed, how those machines should be configured, and what state the infrastructure should continuously maintain. So all these things should be taken care by Bosch.